Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old 4th Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
Happy Tuesday. Thank you for listening, whether it's on the America One Radio app between the hours of 9 and 10 a.m., 5 to 6 p.m., the replay, or at AmericaOneRadio.com, those same time slots, on demand at ProgressiveVoices.com, or via podcast. I appreciate that. Later in the show, Democratic Socialist candidate Gabriel Sanchez will join the show. He is the Democratic nominee for Georgia State House District 42 in the Smyrna area. He upset the incumbent Democrat, Representative Terry Anulowicz, who has been on this show as well. And so I immediately reached out to him upon him winning that surprise primary outcome, and he's going to join the show. Looking forward to that very much. You know what I got to look forward to? I got to look forward to getting in my own shower and taking a nice, long, hot, bathing, even showering my head and face shower this morning. It was wonderful. The things we take for granted. You don't realize just how fast society can devolve with just the thinnest veneer cracked. By that I mean all it takes for us to just absolutely lose our shit is for us to go without water, piped into our homes, pressurized and pushed from plants after it's, of course, been cleaned as much as can be through pipes that, well, let's not discuss the inside of those pipes that are upwards of 80 years old. Anyway, all it takes for society to just devolve into insanity is for us to lose that precious commodity that, when you think about it, we don't really spend a whole lot of money for. Think about all the work that goes into water coming to us in a landlocked city, our nearest navigable body of water, and I say navigable in air quotes because you really shouldn't. It's the Chattahoochee River. That is the city's main source of water that they then use to make sure that it's 560-some thousand residents and the businesses that serve those residents and the 5 million people around it. It's just kind of remarkable. And I'm not going to sit here and cover for Atlanta Watershed for deficiencies in their service. But I will say this. I think now that we're sort of on the back end of this water crisis, there are a few things that we should all be aware of, if we're not by now. For one, the men and women who work for the city's water department should be commended. That's right, commended. People are outraged. Oh my gosh, how did they let this happen? They really didn't. And it's almost impossible to predict when a pipe that you can't just walk by and look at every day. It's not like they can run around and inspect pipes that are under pavement more often than not, that have in some cases been where they are for 50 to 80 years under layer after layer of development. I mean, there are measures and means that they can keep tabs on those sorts of things. But then we also complain when they do make a major repair or replacement and tie up traffic for days, weeks, months. It's a no-win situation. But I have to say, the folks at the Atlanta Watershed Division have been on the job without fail, some of them without sleep, a lot of them, like us, without water at home since Friday morning. And they're out there still because there are still issues to be dealt with. The man who heads Atlanta Watershed, Al Wiggins Jr., has been on the job a total of 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Could you imagine? Could you imagine getting a job and within 3 weeks, the biggest test of the job that could possibly come your way, boom, lands in your lap, unexpected, unprepared, heading into a long, busy weekend. Your boss is getting on a flight as it's devolving to go do a fundraiser in Memphis, Tennessee. And by the way, that little nugget that Mayor Andre Dickens went to Memphis, Tennessee to attend a fundraiser held in his honor by the mayor of Memphis, I believe a fraternity brother of his. That was sort of known on social media all throughout the weekend. A former school board candidate, and I cannot remember her name off the top of my head, is the one who brought that to light. And the Atlanta Community Press Collective shared that information because she saw the flyer, the digital flyer for the fundraiser, and tweeted it, and they retweeted it. I spotted it. I mentioned it yesterday when guest George Cheedy from the Atlanta Objective joined me to discuss that. That was news to him at that point. Well, now all of a sudden, local media knows about it too. TV stations, the AJC, they're all over that story now. Now, I'm starting to think they listen to this show. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm starting to think they listen to this show because that's the second time in 2 weeks that information on this show was on this show well before they reported on it, and then they reported on it. Last week, it was the GOP plant running as a Democratic primary winner, a Democratic nominee, for Georgia's 11th congressional district. We already don't have viability in most of Georgia's congressional districts anyway because of gerrymandering. And in the one that you think we might, we don't. Actually, we don't because it's Georgia's 11th, and this woman stands not a snowball's chance in hell of unseating Barry Loudermilk anyway. But even if she did, she's a GOP plant. So, wah, wah. Anyway, we broke that story last week. Seth Taylor joining us from the Fulton County Democratic Party, a Sandy Springs Democrat, North Fulton Democratic captain, I believe. He brought that story to this show, and he broke it on social media days before I even had him on. And then the next day, AJC, TM Mitchell, they're all over it. Is this show influential? Huh. Anyway, Riley Bunch of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution on that story that the mayor hopped on a plane as water mains were starting to break here in Atlanta to go to his fundraiser in Memphis. The mayor's office said in a statement that Dickens traveled to Memphis at the invitation of the city's mayor, and while there met with local elected business and community leaders, followed by the fundraiser event. The quote here from the statement: when Mayor Dickens left Atlanta, the consensus was that the water main break was similar to the roughly 530 breaks or leaks that the city of Atlanta experienced over the last 12 months, according to a spokesperson in his office. It was not until late Friday evening, after repairs had been attempted, that the city learned the severity of the breaks. I was here. A lot of us were here. We didn't have water by lunchtime. I know this because I had to go to lunch with a lot more cologne on than I normally go with. I'm not a deep cologner, but I was on Friday. Now, I mean, that being said, it's easy to hindsight 2020 to armchair quarterback from the future here. The severity, how long the water was going to be a problem. A few hours, okay, whatever. That's something for the water department. Don't need the mayor helicoptering over you. But not knowing the severity of it, I don't know, man. I got to say by 2:30, 3 o'clock, no, we knew. I think we knew. Because there were multiple breaches at this point. So anyway, back to Riley Bunch's reporting here. During a packed press conference on Monday morning at the site of the water break in Midtown, the mayor didn't provide any more clarity on the timeline of his travel. After a brief update on the incident that left the buildings immediately surrounding the break without water, Dickens walked off without taking questions. As one angry Midtown resident complained about the city's lack of timeline, the mayor was quickly ushered away. Here's another little nugget. Dickens also changed a scheduled event with an AJC reporter at his office Monday afternoon involving college students starting a new internship program. The students were shuttled back to the mayor's office, but the reporter was denied access after initially being told she would be allowed to cover the meeting. It's not uncommon for elected officials to travel out of state for campaign events, but the choppy communication from the city on the water issues and lack of visibility of the mayor for the first 24 hours led to intense criticism from residents. Dickens' campaign also defended the mayor's response to the breaks. Well, they're the ones that got the money for it, so of course they're going to defend it. Mayor Dickens rushed back to Atlanta Saturday morning soon after realizing the water shutoff issue would not quickly be resolved, according to Howard Franklin, a senior advisor on the mayor's re-election campaign. He was on the ground in Memphis for less than 24 hours. Riley Bunch also stating in this article, during the press conference Saturday, he admitted to the lack of information being provided and apologized for how long it took to alert residents about what was going on. We could have done a better job over the past day, he said. And for that, I apologize in how we have not been able to give you as much up-to-date information as possible. The thing is, the information problem wasn't solved over the weekend. And I get it. You're having to work on, water main issues. But in the process, you should be at least somehow evolving on the communications problems. Instead, Commissioner Alex Wan, in yesterday's city council meeting with Al Wiggins from Atlanta Watershed there to take questions, he pointed out yesterday afternoon that there were still communications problems.
Commissioner, thank you and your team for the hard work you've done. My question has to go back to communications. Who's driving that? Is that the Mayor's Office of Communications or the Watershed Department's Communications Office?
So it's as the CEO mentioned, it's the whole of government. It's a team effort. So I do have a communications director that is attached to the Department of Watershed Management, but communications and the distribution of communications has not been limited just to the communications professional. It's been through ongoing discussions, but
who's driving the strategy? And the reason why I ask is that, so for example, you just shared with us in the beginning of your presentation, it's the first time we had heard that the boil advisory area had been reduced. And quite frankly, I mean, if you think about, we have to think of ourselves in the public side. The first thing they want to know is, when am I getting my water back? Second thing everybody wants to know is, when am I going to be out of the boil advisory? And I'm looking across all of your communications channels, and I'm not seeing what I believe to be a coherent strategy that takes into account the public. And that's probably why we're all feeling the heat from this weekend, is that aside from the silence, there was a 10-hour silence, which was deafening. But once we got back to that, it feels like we're not telling folks what they want to know. And so I just need to have the confidence that someone is thinking through that and driving and implementing and recognizing that when we roll out a message, it is what folks want to hear, and it's consistent across all channels. And I'll say one more thing. Your Watershed website, which is now finally up and running, still is showing the old map. So again, we got to be hyper vigilant about letting the public know what's happening. We get the technical piece. We're going to dive into that later. But again, I don't know if you got a response to that, but please help us help you.
So I would like to address the communications on the revised boil advisory area. This information came really 10 minutes before I walked into the chambers. This really had in our GIS teams, hence the reason that I don't have a map available. We just got the information, just received approval from the EPD to revise those maps. I know you're not speaking of that one issue, but I did want to provide clarification, is that this is newly released information is the reason.
Got it, but you should have a team, the mayor's office should have a team that's out there driving your communications, not you. So the second that comes out, you came in here, it's been almost an hour, it's still not up, in my opinion, in a way that's digestible by the public. So just take that, you've got a lot, I want you to focus on the repairs, but I hope your support team and the mayor's support team can really take that off your plate, because again, think about the public. That's what all they're getting is what we're pushing out, and let's help them get through this crisis, and then we can come back on Monday morning, quarterback the technical pieces of it.
Yes, sir. Received.
Thank you.
A sterling example of a lack of communication from Atlanta Watershed, City of Atlanta, Mayor's office, when the city councilman says, you just told me something after sitting in this chamber for an hour that you've known about for more than an hour, and yet I look on your website, I look on your social media, and that news is still not out. More than an hour has transpired. That's crucial info. Water delivery for a city that's been without it for 3 days, sections of the city anyway. That's crucial information, and I'm not saying that Al Wiggins sat on it, but he knew about it, and his department knew about it, and it wasn't out. It wasn't on social media. It wasn't advised to the media. Yeah, that's a key problem that has to be addressed, that has to be worked out. We can talk about 80-year-old pipes. Yes, obviously we have to deal with that. But communication is a utility as well when you are in government that the people you serve deserve to have from you. Because like water, they pay for it. They just don't get a bill for it. This is The Ron Show on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, and on demand at ProgressiveVoices.com. Follow The Ron Show on your preferred avenue of social media, or all of them if you'd like. Yeah, let's rack up some likes and follows. At Ron Show ATL on the Twitter X platform and Facebook and Instagram and Threads. Don't do much on Threads, I'm not going to lie. Maybe one day that'll catch on and it'll become the hot social medium. And I'd like to hope it does, just because I don't like contributing to Elon, but whatever. It is what it is. I'm noticing, by the way, the dynamics of the mayor's office and Mayor Andre Dickens' hold on it. He is up for re-election next year. There are, not to my knowledge, any named candidates seeking to take him out of office yet. But I think there's definitely blood in the water, and I think you can see this when you start to see opinion pieces in local publications. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Bill Torpy. By the way, the AJC and Mayor Dickens have had a pretty rosy relationship. And as George Cheedy from the Atlanta Objective yesterday said, a lot of us like Mayor Dickens. I know, I give him a hard time, mostly on the Atlanta Public Training Facility, because I feel like he sort of got wrangled into a high-dollar corporate, mostly conservative, junket here to push something that isn't all that popular with its residents, and that became more and more apparent as more and more folks became aware of it, knew the funding mechanism of it, knew the ecological impact of it, and yet just stubbornly stayed with it despite overwhelming opposition in public forums, despite more than 100,000 signatures on petitions to stop, just stormed right ahead, just subverted democracy. And in the process, I believe, may have damaged, I think very likely has damaged, President Joe Biden's opportunity to again win Georgia in 2024. Mayor Dickens, by the way, on the Biden-Harris 2024 campaign committee. It's not a good thing. Anyway, Bill Torpy last night, lit into Mayor Dickens as the communications, air quotes, the communications mayor, and how he slipped on wet pavement, as we all did. Bill Torpy writing, in fact, this just dropped 3 hours ago. I learned that Mayor Andre Dickens had gotten himself in a pickle with this water debacle while sitting at a table Saturday night on the town square of Petersburg, Illinois, population 2,300. A woman at our table said, I see your mayor's catching heat for disappearing while the city's out of water. That's Saturday night in Petersburg, Illinois. Bill Torpy knew this. Some stranger in Illinois knew this. And we reported on it yesterday morning. The AJC had it last night. Maybe there's some communications gaffes within the halls of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I don't know. Anyway, he goes to write, you know things are bad when middle America is talking about you. I'll include this piece in the show notes at ronshowytl.com. He writes, as repair crews were considering the magnitude of the break, Dickens was boarding a flight to Memphis where he was to appear at a fundraiser for his own reelection. It was about 2 p.m. Friday. Water had been gushing for more than 2 hours at that point. The fundraiser, by the way, was held in the 6 to 8 p.m. Central Time Zone, which means 7 to 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. Those of you who live in Atlanta who were living in this crisis, Friday, 7 p.m., you knew things were bad. You knew things were bad. I knew things were bad about 5 o'clock that day because, again, I had to go to a luncheon having not showered since the day before. Fortunately, I hadn't gone to the gym or anything like that, but nonetheless, I knew. I knew by Friday afternoon early things were bad. But he was there for a fundraiser. Upwards of, what's it, like $800 to $2,500 tickets people had paid to fundraise on his behalf. So he had to, I guess, grit it out. Couldn't reschedule. No, surely they could have rescheduled. But I digress. Anyway, Gabriel Sanchez is a Democratic socialist, and he's going to be on the show. I know, you're freaking out. Not a socialist. Calm down. He is the Democratic nominee for House District 42, currently held by Representative Democrat Terry Anulowicz. We will discuss his ascension into politics, and if he's as surprised as anyone else that he is the primary winner. When we return on The Ron Show, the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, on demand at ProgressiveVoices.com, and wherever you podcast.
This is The Ron Show on America One Radio.
So we're now a couple weeks removed from the Georgia primary, which we all know we saw record low turnout throughout much of the state. However, to his credit, one young candidate here in Metro Atlanta rallied enough support to win a seat from an incumbent. Well, not the seat yet, but the nomination within the party from an incumbent candidate. And we have him on the show. Gabriel Sanchez joining us from Smyrna. Gabriel, how are you this morning, buddy?
Hello. Hey, thank you so much. Yes, I'm good. How are you, Ron?
I'm good. I'm sitting here looking over your work experience, just on your Facebook page. My God, you've had more jobs at your young age. You're like half my age than I've had in my entire life. You have literally put in the work. For those who are like, who is this kid to think he can take it? You've literally put in the work. You've done canvassing for the Democratic Party. You've been a legislative aide. You were a fellow at Sam Park's reelection campaign. Let's see. You've done, again, more canvassing, campaign coordinator for the state party, Young Democrats, outreach, legislative aid for Park Cannon. Did I mention that already? The Georgia Redistricting Alliance. You've done a lot already. And you're like half my age. Are you tired? Have you gotten a nap? I feel like you need a nap. Have you gotten one yet?
No, I definitely need to learn a little bit more about resting. That's for sure. But I'm trying my best to balance that out. But I think it's important work that we need to be doing because there's a lot of work that needs to be done in Georgia, and I've seen that through my organizing and advocacy work. And, so
there's a little thing you could Google called the 8-minute nap. I'm just going to let you go ahead and write that down and look it up later. The 8-minute nap. There's a way to do this that I think would absolutely benefit you and recharge your batteries whenever you need to. Just go ahead and take that and use that when you need to. The 8-minute nap. Gabriel Sanchez joining us.
Appreciate it.
Who is the Democratic nominee for State House District 42. And I don't know if you watch like I do. You're probably a political junkie in some respects, to the point that you may even watch local shows like the Georgia Gang on Fox 5, where the local conservative pundits are just hand-wringing over a Democratic socialist could somehow wind up in the gold dome, for crying out loud. Well, there are folks who are freaking out about that on the right, but have you sensed any of that even within the Democratic Party?
So I do think that in some of the more quote unquote liberal media, there has been some, pushback, if just to say the least. However, I've actually been meeting up with people in the local Democratic caucus, and they've been pretty open about it and been willing to speak to me. So, and that's honestly due to the fact that I've already have a lot of these relationships. Like you mentioned earlier, I worked for both parks, Park Cannon and Sam Park.
Yeah.
Who are both in leadership now. And I've also, formed a lot of relationships with a lot of other representatives through my work. And so I've already had these relationships beforehand. So that's why I think it's interesting for a lot of these people who don't really know me to question whether or not I'm going to be able to work with people. I'm always going to stand strong on my principles for sure, no matter what. And I do think we need to change how our government is working. However, that doesn't mean I'm not willing to work with anyone based as long as it's, on the terms of our progressive values.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as we go from there, I'm willing to work with you. If we agree on the issue, let's do it.
Yeah, a little coalition building, even within your own camp. I get that. I think you're fortunate too.
Yeah.
Like you don't come from wealth. You don't have a job that really even allows you to take weeks upon weeks off to serve in the Georgia General Assembly, but you live in Metro Atlanta, so you're afforded that opportunity. I speak to candidates and those who often ascend to the office all the time about how impossible it is for most of the United States to even feel the opportunity to represent people just like themselves in even their state legislature because of the pay. The pay doesn't pay for it. It doesn't. You don't run for this office looking to get rich off the pay from the gig. Is what I'm saying. It's not an income replacement. but also, like, if you were in, say, Waycross, Georgia, this would not be possible for you. Can you speak to that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think it's a testament to the fact that, like, there's a lot of inequity in our society when it comes to different various factors. And as you said, one of those is the zip code you live in, and also if you're in urban or rural areas. And our rural areas in Georgia are just so left behind by our state government, despite the fact that we have so many representatives from those areas. It seems like they're not really doing much to actually try to help those people with all the hospital closures we're seeing, the lack of job opportunities. And I really think that if we fight for the values that this campaign ran on and our movement believes in, we can actually help a lot of people, not just in urban areas, but in rural areas and ex-urban areas as well, that are struggling because of the insane amount of housing costs that's going up, the inability to find work that actually pays a living wage, and the lack of access to healthcare, as well as the ability to have paid leave. And so a good example of that is, even though they are creating jobs, say with the new factory in South Georgia near Savannah with the electric vehicle plant, they're trying their hardest to ensure that those jobs are not union. In other words, they want to make sure they can exploit the workers there as much as possible and pay them as little as possible. Mm-hmm. And so we have to make sure that we're fighting for every single Georgian, regardless of whether they're in Metro Atlanta or not, because there's a lot of people out there who need help.
Let's talk about your background a little bit. You are, tell me right if I'm right or wrong, you're second generation American here. Like, your family hails from Colombia originally, correct?
Yeah, I was born here, but my parents are from Colombia.
Okay,
yes.
Gotcha. Okay, so then you're first generation, I guess, technically.
Yes, first generation.
So you come with a lot of experience from that realm. Your family is anybody who's dined at Mexico Lindo, we can thank your family for, and I will.
Yeah.
So grateful for that. But also, you guys have dealt with the struggle of just about what every other American family has had to, except for the also enormous burden of immigration status. Even living in Miami for a little while, all of you in a small apartment. You spoke about the impact of the Trayvon Martin killing, because he wasn't just a kid who went to school in Florida. He was someone that you'd actually gone to class with.
Right.
So that impacted the formulation of your values. When Bernie Sanders ran for president, that obviously, pinged with you. I don't think you weren't voting age at that point, right? No?
I was. He was the first person I ever voted for.
Oh, okay. There you go. Yeah, there you go. So, but I think what I'm trying to craft here is this picture, how someone your age, how your generation can be of a mindset that we see this in polling now. A lot of under 30, under 40 voters are like, burn it all down. This doesn't work. The system doesn't work. You're going to try and work within the system. Can you understand both facets of, protecting the system, but also why there are so many under 40 voters who are like, man, screw this. This doesn't work. Well,
for me, it's not necessarily about protecting the system. It's about actually making it work, because it doesn't work right now. Our institutions have failed us. We saw that with the COVID-19 pandemic. We've seen that since the 2008 recession. And we need to course correct ASAP. Otherwise, we're going to see dire consequences if we don't. I think no one, especially in our age range, will tell you that this country is going in the right direction. And if we don't change course now, it's going to get even worse. We are, we're in the midst of a crisis where our government is bought off by the wealthy elite and the major corporations and does their bidding, regardless of who it benefits. The only people it's benefiting is them. Everyone else gets screwed over. That's why we need to have politicians who are actually going to fight for working people and not take corporate money so that we can get money out of politics, because that's what's corrupting our system. And so what we need to do is we need people both in and outside the system working together to fight for the changes that we want to see for working people. It's not enough for me just to be in there, or even for us to elect many progressives in there. We need people on the outside doing the protests, putting the pressure on the state capitol, organizing our communities to have that, because we need to use every tool we have at our disposal. And that's what I believe in. I want to use my office as a way to organize our communities. So it's not just about me being a representative or even electing more of the progressive representatives. That's a huge part of it. But we also need people from the outside putting the pressure on the system and ensuring that we see the changes we want to see. And that's what I want to help build a movement out of that.
We are with Gabriel Sanchez. He is the Democratic nominee for State House Seat 42, currently represented by Democrat Representative Terry Nulwitz. It's interesting that you hear a candidate who, and let's admit it now, Gabriel, you're a politician, buddy. I hate to say it, but I'm diagnosing you. You're a politician now. But it's interesting to hear a politician say, we need protests. When we've had, I'd say for the last 20 years, an effort by politicians in office to regulate and push protests out of their line of sight, out of mind in many respects. We see this in a lot of law out of Washington, where you have to stay a certain distance, and it's a stifling of First Amendment rights. And you, on the other hand, are saying, no, I want to see the protests. And that doesn't necessarily always mean that the protests aren't going to be targeting you. You actually see the value in protest when you need to hear it from the people. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, it's a very, very healthy part of democracy. And anyone who's against that is an authoritarian and doesn't like being criticized, which is, ridiculous. And we're seeing that in Georgia with a bunch of the laws that they've attempted to pass to limit our free speech, and have successfully passed a couple. And it's extremely dangerous to go down that rabbit hole. It's a slippery slope. And that's why I believe in ensuring that we have representatives who are willing to take charge on those and not be afraid to side with the people when you need to. I'll be out protesting with them if I need to, if that's what is required. And I've done it, I've been going to lots of the protests before, when Roe v. Wade was overturned, when the Black Lives Matter protest came out, when Ahmaud Arbery was murdered and in Georgia. And, like I said before, you have to use every tool at your disposal. And that certainly includes protests, because if you do not allow people to peacefully protest, as MLK says, riots are the voices of the unheard. If you do not allow people to have a peaceful, legal way to, voice their concerns, then that can cause more chaos and more violence. And we do not want that. We got to make sure that we respect the right to free speech and to protest.
That brings me to my next question. You have been a vocal opponent protesting, campaigning, canvassing even, for the Stop Cop City movement. I want to ask you, because elected Democrats in the city of Atlanta, and in DeKalb County even, have done well to suppress the voices of those who oppose this. They literally have petitions in boxes, and are awaiting a court decision that will be honestly too late for the completion of that Atlanta Public Safety Training Facility. Give me your assessment. How damaging is the Cop City movement being suppressed by local Democrats? How damaging is that to those who have been grassroots activists and their enthusiasm for voting in 2024? You were able to channel it in the primary. Are Democrats going to be able to survive it locally this November?
I think that's a very good question. And honestly, it's very disappointing and frustrating to see just how hard those local Democrats are pushing to put anti-democratic measures that they, criticize Republicans for doing in the state of Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same playbook. It's just when it happens to them, they say, oh, well, we just have to make sure. No, it's all BS. They're doing it because they don't want to listen to the people, because they know if it went for a vote, they'd probably lose.
Mm.
And so that is going to affect turnout. That's what I was saying earlier. If you shut out any way of peaceful protesting, I mean, why would they support you? Why would they go out and vote for candidates of your choice if you're not even going to allow them to voice their concern, especially with a issue that polls so closely? Most polls have a very, very tight margins of whether people support or oppose this facility. So clearly it's controversial. Clearly there needs to be a vote on it. Now, of course, my district is not in the city of Atlanta, so it's not directly impacted by this, but it's still all connected, because Cop City is an environmental issue where they're tearing down one of the biggest forests in the Atlanta area. Just like here in Smyrna, we had the Sterigenics facility that's still open that, has been poisoning our community with, toxic carcinogenic chemicals. And so, these kind of issues are connected, right? It's like about corporate greed. It's about corporations wanting to do whatever they please with the communities they're in, regardless of what the community wants. And, that's again going back to the central point of having a government that really represents working people and not the corporation.
Mm-hmm. We're with Gabriel Sanchez. He is the Democratic nominee for State House District 42, currently housed by Democrat Representative Terry Anulowicz. Got a few more questions if you got a few more minutes with me, but I do have to take a quick break. You don't mind me doing that, do you?
No, that's fine. Let's take a quick break.
All right, good deal. We'll take a quick break. We'll let him go grab a coffee. I'm going to grab a coffee. Back in just a few minutes. The Ron Show here on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, on demand at ProgressiveVoices.com, or wherever you podcast. We're in the home stretch here on The Ron Show. We've got show notes every time we do this, ronshowatl.com. In today's show notes, you will get a link to Gabriel Sanchez's campaign website where he lists off a whole bunch of issues that are very important to him. And by the way, I have to commend you. Your TikTok, and TikTok's a big deal politically. Your TikTok, I thought was rather well engaging. You have more TikTok followers than most state-level candidates have Facebook or Instagram followers, or Twitter X as well. Commendable on that, man. Speak to me.
Thank you.
About the survivability of TikTok. Do you think it's going to survive, or will? I mean, I grew up on Vine, so I say grew up. I remember Vine. Like Vine was what TikTok is now. I don't know why we just don't get Vine back. Instagram bought it and smothered it to death. But which I guess we could talk a little bit more about your being a democratic socialist and how corporate America is sort of stifling our dissent and wrecking our economy. But yeah, TikTok, that's a pretty important tool for you. If it goes away, what are you going to do?
That's a great question. Right now, I'm just going to keep using it as is until we see what happens. I do think that, they're probably going to do everything they can to keep it alive. But if it does end up leaving, we just got to pivot, just like we always do. As organizers, the people who are in power always like to change the rules of the game. That way to make you, lose as much as possible. And as organizers, you're just used to adapting and shifting, just like, I've been doing for so long. So if I can't use TikTok, I'll use Instagram Reels and maybe start a YouTube channel. Who knows?
Yeah,
we'll just keep on going.
So you listed in your issues, the first thing on there, and this is not alphabetical or anything like that, and I want to know if this is by design. You listed housing as the first issue on your issues page at SanchezForGeorgia.com. Is that on purpose?
Oh, 100%. The housing crisis is insane and has been accelerated by the COVID pandemic. I mean, I'm currently renting. This is actually the first year I was ever able to renew my lease because of just how much rent goes up every year. And I just feel like it's such a basic staple of a, stable, comfortable family life to be able to have housing. It shouldn't be a question of whether people should be able to afford it. And yet here we are with that housing so unattainable for so many people. And it's just, squeezing people so hard. I just don't understand how some people are even able to afford to live at this point with how much rents have gone up. And it's because we have these huge corporate landlords coming in, buying up all these properties, jacking up the prices and making it unattainable for anyone. I mean, we have 3 corporations who own over 19,000 homes in the metro Atlanta area. That should not be allowed. Housing, single-family homes should be for families.
Yeah.
And so, I don't think that's a controversial statement. So it's an extremely important issue for me because that is the staple and the foundation you need for stability for anyone. And without that, like, how are you even going to be able to do anything else, like getting a good education or being able to have access to healthcare if you don't even have a home that you can, be comfortable in and know that you're going to be able to stay there for a good amount of time. And this issue really, is connected to all the other issues. That's why it's a priority for me and something I'm going to work on in the state house.
Terrific. Well, you're talking to a residential real estate agent, so you're spitting my language. I've pointed out a few times that I think housing is the biggest non-political issue of the 2024 cycle that not many candidates are talking about. So here again, you're tapping into something that most candidates aren't, and I think that's pretty important. I've also pointed out that, like, ironically enough, the fight's happening on the front lines. Homeowners associations in newer build subdivisions, anyway, are limiting the corporate ownership, but the older established neighborhoods, which we all know are usually more populated with, voters of color, Americans of color, they don't have those same rights afforded to them. And I don't think it's that cities or counties don't want to do something. I just think they're caught flat-footed. Like this whole thing surprised them that these corporations have come in and swooped in and bought homes from people who were selling them but didn't know who were buying them.
Yeah. And, I think that, that's one of the issues we have is that people don't recognize a problem until it's kind of too late.
Yeah.
I think it's important for people to recognize that this is what happens when you divest and underfund and undermine, public services.
Yeah.
And so that way, this is the logical conclusion. And so, people who I think are our persuasion, who are more progressive or more, know about how economics works, understands that if you allow housing to become a commodity that you can make a profit off of, it's only natural that eventually you're going to have these corporations pop up that are going to do everything they can to squeeze as much money out of people and make something unattainable. It was only a matter of time. I mean, this isn't anything new, right? It started more so during the 2008 recession after that collapse in the modern era. And then it just accelerated because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So it wasn't like it wasn't already happening. It's just, it got way worse. And so that's how people started noticing. But what we need is a government who understands what working families are going through and can see in the long term how certain things can affect people. But it's not just about what's every 2 years or every 4 years, what we need to do. We need to talk about what are the next 20 or 30 years looking like and how are we going to make sure that our families, our kids and our grandkids are going to be okay at that time.
So here I was worried that we
more of
Here I was worried we were going to have enough to talk about for 23 minutes, and I've got like 45 seconds left, unfortunately. But I will invite people to go to SanchezForGeorgia.com to check out the issues: universal health care, economic rights. You not only have complaints or gripes, you have proposals, and I'm really impressed by that. And so we'll make sure we share that in the show notes at RonChoATL.com. Last question: have you reached out to Representative Nolowitz? Have you guys talked? Is she going to work to make sure that the Democrats hold on to that seat?
So I've tried to. It seems like right now there's no interest in having a conversation, which I'm very disappointed by. I was hoping to work with her, but hopefully, she'll come around. I'll give her some time, and we'll see if we can work together to help the people.
And I'm sure, given time, that will be the case. I've had her on the show. She's a wonderful woman. And anyway, my best to you, and good luck as you head on into the future general election cycle. Get a little bit of rest, because once I'd say we start talking about July 4th fireworks, you're going to have to get really busy.
Oh, yeah, pretty much. It's all full ahead after that. So.
All right. Gabriel Sanchez, the Democratic nominee for State House seat number 42. Thanks for joining the Ron Show today. We appreciate it, buddy.
Thank you so much, Ron. I appreciate you.
Hear the replay 5 to 6 p.m. today on America One Radio, on demand all day at progressivevoices.com or wherever you podcast. Take care. Have a good one.